All right, go.
Hi, I'm Harrison Marks. I am running for the New York State Assembly, representing the neighborhoods of Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, parts of Midtown, and parts of the Upper West Side, on the west side of Manhattan. It's the first time that this assembly seat has been open in 52 years. And it's a really exciting moment for our neighborhood, and also a moment of transition and difficulty when we are facing many challenges emerging from the pandemic. And I hope to be a representative for us up in Albany so that we can solve our problems. I am a lifelong New Yorker. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm an Obama administration alum. I worked in regulatory policy. More recently, I've worked with our governor's office, helping during the pandemic on an independent commission called the Reimagine New York Commission, where I was our staff lead on workforce development, support for small businesses, and support for the arts. And finally, I'm a relatively new father. My son, Henry, was born last summer, and he is a 6th generation New Yorker. The reasons why I am running for this position right now are that our neighborhood needs a lot of help coming back from the pandemic. We have astronomically high costs of housing. We have streets that aren't safe enough, and we have way too many vacant storefronts. And I believe that I can solve all of those challenges, or at least make inroads into solving them. I've got a lot of specific policy goals and the experience and skills needed to achieve those goals. We are at a moment in our neighborhood's history when we can't just keep sending politicians as usual, Albany as usual, up into our state legislature. State legislatures have never been more important to this country, and our neighborhood has never needed more good policy making than it does right now. And I believe I can make a difference by going up there. Election's in 12 days, so I'm very excited to spread our message and to have a great conversation with you, Brian.
Excellent, Harrison. And I want to thank you for appearing on Cool Cable. I want to point out to our viewers, I did email all the Democratic people, all the Democrats who are running for the same seat. And as you pointed out, it is open for the first time in 50 some years. It's currently occupied by Mr. Richard Godfrey. I did want to ask you about, I mentioned there was a couple of questions I had, and I also am a resident of this district. There's a bill pending, obviously you're not in the assembly yet, A6829, I believe. I did mention it to your campaign manager. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'll just tell our viewers. This is a bill to give us the rights. I looked on your website. You have an excellent website. I think is it Harrison Marks NY? Harrison Marks for NY.
Harrison Marks for NY. It's spelled Harrison Marks Americas FORNY.com.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, and it mentioned a lot of your platform, which I agree with everything there. But I wanted to.
I'll take it.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to just point out one issue here. Not that I disagree with you at all, but you said protect gig workers, which obviously is correct. Something people should get paid for their work. I just for your information, and you acknowledge, I guess you have worked for government. I've been working for the New York City Transit Authority for over 20 years. I was assigned to Ground Zero, and let's just say out of that, I became a whistleblower. And after a number of years, they got tired with me and they just stopped paying me, committing wage theft, among other criminal activities. But there's a law called Labor Law 190, which states the term employer should not apply to government agencies. And what that means is that government workers in New York State cannot sue under state law for wage theft. Private employees, like hopefully these gig workers in the future, will be able to get triple damages or double damages for wage theft, depending, I guess, on how egregious it is. But government workers, we apparently do not have any rights to our wages under state law, and that we're just a form of charity. And this has been covered up by government officials across the board. I did mention to you, I didn't want to speak about public corruption in general, but if you could address this, if you have an opinion. I just point out Mr. Godfrey also is a co-sponsor of this bill, but it unfortunately never got a vote in the Labor Committee, and of course never got voted by the Rules Committee. and is not law as we speak. Are you at all familiar with this?
So yes, I am familiar, and I absolutely have a strong opinion about this. One of the core issues that has drawn me to public service throughout my career is my understanding that our employment, our work, forms a core part of our lives. And if you sit down and think about it, probably a lot of us know a lot of people who are not satisfied in their jobs for one reason or another. They don't find the work meaningful. They don't feel like they are compensated enough for the work. It interrupts their things that they feel passionately about. And to me, especially in such a wealthy society, it's a really, really sad state of affairs. John Maynard Keynes, the noted economist, 100 years ago predicted that we'd be living in a world now where people were able to pursue more of their passions. And I think we should at least be living in a world where people are compensated fairly for their work. And so that, again, is one of the main reasons why I've entered public service, that I want to find ways to make certain that our economy is working for us, given that we spend probably most of our waking hours working. And so I absolutely am aware of the issue that you're describing, Brian, and I absolutely have a strong opinion about it, which is that, to me, the distinction that currently exists between employees of agencies and employees of private sector employers makes no sense. In my view, employment is defined by the relationship between an employer and an employee. It's not defined by the status of an employer and whether that employer is part of the public sector or part of the private sector. And so I would be a proud co-sponsor of this legislation, because employees of public agencies should be protected from wage theft, obviously, in the same way that any other employee should be protected from wage theft. And by the way, even more broadly, in the way that anyone should be protected from any theft. So I feel very strongly about that, and very strongly about this bill.
Absolutely. And thank you for, I would say, supporting it. It sounds like you would be interested in becoming a co-sponsor should you, get elected on June 28th. That's when the primary is. And I certainly think we can all state that everybody eligible to vote in that for that primary should certainly vote. And obviously, and again, point out that Harrison Marks is appearing on this show. None of the others who were running for this office have chosen to appear on this show, or as far as I'm aware, any other public access show. And granted, just to us normal people who are not real, major media, just the ability as a local show to ask questions. And certainly I'm very glad to hear that. And I would just mention one thing. I have a background in economics, and the idea of wage theft really goes to the core of capitalism itself. Obviously, these are the types of things that can, cause revolutions, that cause depressions, that cause, frankly, violence. And I think one of the reasons that this hasn't happened more, this hasn't been discovered more, is that frankly, government employment is fairly reliable. They do pay you more often than not. And it's only in egregious cases like mine, where I believe it was the former governor himself who was very vindictive. Just for your information, I did sue to overturn the Taylor law, which is, we don't have to go into that. But he seemed to hold a personal grudge against me because of that. And so they're committing these criminal acts. So my next question was about going into that, I think segueing into that perfectly.
Well, before we get to your next question, Brian,
sure.
Can I just say, I completely agree with you that theft and not following through on contracts is a recipe for disaster. I think our modern society is based on our ability to contract. I happen to be the only lawyer in this race, a licensed attorney in New York. And one of the first things you learn in law school and learn to think about in law school is something that a lot of us take for granted, which is that in our society, contracts are enforceable, and an employment contract is no different from any other contract. If contracts weren't enforceable, we couldn't enter into agreements with one another. We couldn't plan for the future. We couldn't have civilization. And so, I mean, not to get too extreme about it, but yes.
No, you're the exact person that should speak to this. And, especially with your legal background. And I would just point out to you, which I found out the hard way is, of course, as we do have a contract. I was working as a train operator in New York City Transit Authority. Of course, we have a very long contract of over 500 pages. We were considered third-party beneficiaries, and there seems to be that you have to prove in court that basically the union is violating your what's called your fair. Oh boy, now I'm forgetting the words. Fair representation, and so so it's just basically some gimmicks and legal fictions that were created to basically deny us our agency, working for an agency. And this, as I said, this gets into our next question because it's certainly all related in public corruption. I was watching this afternoon part of it, of course, the criminal activity by the former guy, the traitor in chief, and obviously we have corruption here in New York. The Mr. Swazi running for governor pointed out in a debate that New York is considered the most corrupt government in New York in the country, local, I guess, state government, which is unfortunate to hear. I think it was Jay Gould who said he bought the legislature back in the 19th century. He bragged about it. So what would you do, just getting back to say this particular bill, which you said you support, and I certainly believe you, which Mr. Godfrey didn't, that would get this passed? I mean, would you ask to get a vote in the Labor Committee? Would you, I mean, are you going to be applying for any committee chairmanships, or what would be the positive steps you would do as say you become the assemblyman?
So the way that I view my responsibilities and capabilities as an assembly person is severalfold. First, I would be one member of a body of about 150 other members. And second, I would be a person who has some form of bully pulpit and standing to speak in some way on behalf of the community. And so the two things that I would do are both related to both of those things have to do with my experience throughout my career, which is in the federal part of the government, state government, private sector. And throughout all of those experiences, what I've done is I've been able to listen to others, understand where people are coming from, what their ultimate goals are, and through doing that, form coalitions to enable multiple disparate people, different stakeholders to come together to achieve shared goals, align on objectives, and then track progress and work together to achieve those objectives. And so I would be the two ways that I would try to get my priorities passed as a freshman assembly member are, number one, related to everything I was just describing, serving as one member of this body, but a capable, competent member who has a lot of experience in coalition building, in getting projects from point A to point B. And I think that's what we need more of in our state legislature. And I'd use those powers to enact bills into law that I care a lot about. Second, on the point about the bully pulpit, is I'd be a strong advocate for issues that are most important to our community, including the issues that I'm running on, which are creating more affordable housing, making our streets feel safer, and filling in all of our vacant storefronts and getting our neighborhood back to vibrancy and economic growth. So that's my answer to your question. I think I'd be.
Oh, excellent. No, that's a great answer, I think. And I think, viewers certainly can make up their own mind on that. Hopefully it answered some of their questions they may have, since they can't. I have to ask for them, I guess.
Yes.
And one other certainly related topic, I think, to the other two that I mentioned, that I said I was going to ask you about was constituent service. Obviously you did go into it a little bit, I guess, but how would you deal with constituent service yourself? Would you think it would differ? Obviously you're currently a constituent of the current assemblyman, Mr. Godfrey. As you mentioned, he's been there for 50 years, retiring at the end of the year. How would you deal with constituent service? Again, assuming you become the assemblyman.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I am by profession a manager. My prior to working on this campaign full time, which is what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 months. My most recent job was in the private sector, advising businesses on how to grow, how to invest in their workforces, how to respond to new competitive dynamics, shifts in industries in order to achieve growth and prosperity and economic growth. And I became relatively senior in that role, and my job is to manage teams in these quite complex projects. And so that the reason why I started talking about that is in relation to your question about constituent services is I believe in this race, a unique skill set related to management and managing an efficient office, responsive office. Anyone who knows me can tell, Jacob, our campaign manager, is on this call, he can tell you, I respond to emails often within minutes, if not seconds. And I keep tabs on everything that needs to get done. And I think that's the sort of office that I manage. And so my skills as a manager that I had built out over years in my professional career would lead me to being an effective, efficient, responsive, competent provider of constituent services for our community. So between the way I view this job is that partially providing services to our constituents and partially enacting laws up in Albany. And that's sort of what this conversation has been oriented around. And I believe that all the training, all the experience that I've had in federal government, state government, legal training, private sector, would lead me to be both an effective provider of constituent services based on my management capabilities and an particularly effective legislator based on my policymaking experience and based on my listening capabilities that we've talked about.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, no, and I have to point out again to the audience that you've been running for assembly in the 75th district. I would point out that I did email you and the others contestants, and you were the only one that responded.
Yeah, there you go. Responsiveness.
Exactly. So that goes right into constituent service. We're both now currently constituents of this in this assembly district. And obviously you reached out. I think that says a lot right there. People, again, can draw their own conclusions to that. Can you go just a little bit? I guess we're getting down here to near the end. What do you happen to know what the dimensions of the district are? And maybe I think you mentioned how long you've lived in the district, and I take it you will have you probably have an office in the district. Just some of the nitty gritty details.
Yeah.
Again, assuming an outcome that would certainly benefit. Let's just say the people of the district.
Absolutely. So I love our neighborhood, our community, our district, however you want to define it. It is the core of New York City, and in my humble opinion, that makes it the core of the world. Arguably. And so our district covers, in addition to being my home, I believe the most important parts of New York State. We've got Penn Station in the district, Hudson Yards in the district, Central Park in the district, a lot of the Hudson River waterfront, the Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, all of Broadway is in our district. And people from literally all around the world would recognize many of these landmarks. In addition to the fact that many of these landmarks, call Penn Station, Hudson Yards, are experiencing a significant change, or proposed change, that is going to require advocacy on behalf of the community to get it right and make sure we don't get it wrong. So that's the district. Again, I love it because to me, it includes all of the most amazing parts of New York City, the diversity of New York City, by any definition. It's also got its own problems, which is part of the reason why I'm running. The district is something that I love and something that I think needs some love and care that I hope I could provide in the assembly. In terms of the exact dimensions of the district, I'd love to answer that question because anyone who is within these dimensions should go out and vote on June 28th. So the dimensions are of the 75th district. 16th Street is the southern border. 5th Avenue, for the most part, is the eastern border. The Hudson River is for the most part the western border, although when you get into Hell's Kitchen, it starts to zigzag a little bit. And then the northern border is largely Central Park South, 59th Street, but the district goes up Central Park West from just that one avenue from 59th Street to 70th. Oh, and another fun fact about the district is that the district itself includes the bottom third of Central Park. So I don't know how many constituents there are out there other than residents of the Central Park Zoo who live in Central Park. But if you do, you should go out and vote.
Absolutely. And the vote is, of course, on June 28th, the primary. And of course, you're running for the Democratic Party nominee for the Assembly District 75. And again, your name is Harrison Marks. And we're getting down here. We're actually at the end of the show here. We just went over 28 minutes. And so I guess right now, this probably won't be going on TV, but I'll certainly upload the whole video to YouTube. And certainly, I guess if they want to get in touch with you, again, you said it's HarrisonMarksFordNY.com. And people should vote early and often. You know, us Democrats are accused of things that the other side actually does. But, you know, certainly we should all vote one time and vote, Mr. Marks came on here, Harrison Marks came on here and answered every question in great detail. And as I pointed out, the other candidates chose not to, which is certainly their right to do. And, you know, certainly what the viewers draw from that, they will. So again, thank you, Harrison, for appearing on Cool Cable. And, you know, I upload it to YouTube. I'll send you a link, and Jacob a link. And this show will go on, not of course tomorrow, but next Friday, of course, prior to the election. It goes on 11:30 p.m. It's on channel 2 at mnn.org. And also the various channels. I don't know all the channels myself. I should, on FiOS, different channels on FiOS, you know, Spectrum, RCN, and all the other, it's on all those cable channels. So again, thank you, Harrison. And I would say very much good luck to you. And, you know, certainly as well in the interest of all the people of this district and, you know, all the viewers. And hopefully, you know, everyone can keep their fingers crossed and let the best person win. And, you know,
yes, fingers crossed. Well, thank you so much for having me, Brian. This was a great conversation.
Absolutely. And hopefully maybe we'll see a positive outcome, and maybe you'll be on again, hopefully. And, you know, there'll be some other questions for you then. And you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. And if Jacob wants to stay on, you know, I'll let you go because it's after 4:30, as you said you had to go. So again, and thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much, Brian. Bye.
Okay, so let me just stop it, I guess.